Hi, everybody. I'm Nick Gillespie, and I am the editor-in-chief of Reason.com and Reason TV, and I'm joined by Katherine Mangu-Ward, the editor of Reason Magazine, current editor of Reason Magazine, and Marty Zupan, who was the editor of Reason Magazine in the 1980s. We are not joined by Matt Welch or Virginia Postrel or Bob Poole, other editors who couldn't make it, but I think we can pick up for them. What we're going to talk about today is reason and libertarianism in the age of Trump. And I also would ask for a big round of applause because this is also a live taping of the Reason podcast. So this will be going up in a couple days. So let people know you're here in the Reason podcast, please. All right, come on. That's enough. All right, a little bit. So just very briefly before, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the issues that were kind of big when we were editing the magazine. I guess mostly, in the distant past, myself, I was editor from 2000 to 2008. Beginning of 2008, Marty, as I said, was in the 80s. Katherine became the editor
like 5 minutes ago.
5 minutes ago, okay? But she's already made the magazine look much better than it has in a long time, so more power to her. But Reason was founded as a monthly magazine of free minds and free markets in 1968. Our website went live in 1994. The video, Reason TV video platform went live in 2007, and the podcast in 2016, about 4 or 5 months ago. We've always been, and I was going to use the term nonpartisan, but we're really unpartisan. Because we, like 7-Up, the Uncola, we're working on a totally different frequency, but we're very engaged, we're independent, we're pre-political. The idea of libertarian with a small L is that it's an attitude, a temperament, a direction, a default setting that informs your political engagements, but it actually exists before them, I think. And we're journalistic. We're a magazine of ideas, but we're also a magazine of journalism. And as Lanny Friedlander, the founder of Reason Magazine, who passed away a few years ago, put it in the first issue, we try to trade in logic, not legends. We are a source of libertarian news, including stories that aren't covered. We were on the criminal justice beat and talking about things like over-policing of black and minority areas, of civil asset forfeiture reform, long before other people were. So we were bringing stories that weren't being covered by the press. But then we also bring a libertarian point of view on big news. So, if you want to know what the libertarian kind of take or a strong libertarian analysis on immigration, on drug policy, on things that are in the news, on trade, you go to Reason. We're a source of community for libertarians. We host intra-movement debates to kind of bring our best ideas out, make them sharper, and also learn how to hate people because they disagree with you on 1% of one issue. It's a very, it's the one thing that I think that makes us human, right, as libertarians. And then we are also, we do outreach and conversion. We reach out to other journalists and give them stories or a way of thinking about the world, which is helpful. And we also try to help build the next generation of libertarians of whatever age. And with that as a kind of a background, we're going to, Marty is going to talk first. Here's a couple of covers from her tenure. One of them is about, and I believe that's from about 1982, the one Vermont's Unknown.
84.
84, and then one about corporate welfare in Texas. But talk a little bit about, Marty, what were kind of the signature issues and ideas that you were grappling with in the 80s, and have they carried forward into contemporary debates?
It was an amazing opportunity to be the editor of Reason to be at Reason from 1979 to 1989. Ronald Reagan was the president during most of that era. He's ancient history to most of you, I guess. But you know Reagan's legacy, and so there was a real flowering of libertarian and free market ideas during that time. But of course, it was mixed with a lot of not libertarian and not free market ideas, so there was plenty of work for us to do. Interestingly, during that decade, there were also increasing changes and liberalizations behind the Iron Curtain, culminating by the end of that decade in the fall of the Berlin Wall. And it was cool to be an observer of that, especially for somebody who grew up in that era of communism.
Yeah, in say '79 when you started working at Reason, did you have any inkling, that the Berlin Wall would be collapsing?
No, it was utterly surprising. Although one of my favorite editorials that I ever wrote, which was in the first Reason volume, was in 1988, and it was titled "1988 Year of Hope," because by that time you could see that there was a very real possibility that the wall was going to fall and it was all going to crumble. So it was cool to be there. But some of the issues that were front and center for us at Reason in those days continue to be, and the cover of that January 1984 issue on vouchers, which was the first issue of which I was actually the editor-in-chief. That issue is still with us, right? Think about the utter panic over the nomination of DeVos, partly because, heavens, she might want more choice for kids in schools. And so that issue is still with us. And other issues have changed in the details, but not in the essentials. So, for example, we did a lot of work on government regulation. And most of you are too young to remember when the airlines were wholly regulated by the government. Prices, entry, amenities on the airplanes, everything was regulated. And likewise, trucking, interstate trucking, railroads, whole industries regulated by the government. The agencies that regulated those industries have been deep-sixed, gone, completely gone. But imagine today, in fact, you don't have to imagine it, if anybody suggests canning the Department of Education, for example, that's considered like a third rail, right? So, so there was some progress. On the other hand, today we have health and safety regulations across a whole swath of our lives. So those industry regulators have gone away, but instead we have the EPA and the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and et cetera, and the newest one is perhaps Elizabeth Warren's favorite, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, right? Yeah. Always well named, right? Always Orwellian named, perhaps I should say.
One of the, if you go back and at Reason.com, you can scroll through all of the old issues, the covers. If you're a subscriber, and you should subscribe to Reason Magazine for $15 a year. You should subscribe, of course, to the Reason podcast at iTunes. But you had a ton of issues where they were people in fishbowls saying, how did I get here? And it was all about these new petty regulations on consumer products and safety issues, it seemed.
Right. So I like to think that Reason played a part in the deregulation that did happen, because from the beginning, through the 70s and through the 80s, Reason was publishing scholars and experts arguing against regulation, particularly at the federal level, long before think tanks were well established in DC and then eventually in all the states around the country. So Reason played a vital role there. While we have all these new regulatory agencies regulations replacing old ones, there has, on the other hand, been enormous progress on personal liberties in a relatively short period of time. And on these issues in the 80s, Reason was often like a voice in the wilderness. But today we have freedom, laissez-faire approach pretty much across the board on personal liberties. We actually ran articles in Reason arguing against serious proposals to have the feds regulate the content of popular music. That's gone away. That issue has gone away. Today, music, all kinds of music, is free in more ways than one on the internet. And this is a case, as in so many others, where technological change has undercut the ability of government to exercise command and control. Exactly.
Marty, are you going to freestyle rap some filthy lyrics right now? Just,
Am I
just
into
ask,
that?
are you going to? Or I guess we'll leave that
Well, my
for the final
grandkids are.
act.
Two more glasses of Chardonnay,
yeah.
and then we can
Yeah.
talk about it.
So the bottom line is to remember that change is possible, and it often isn't a matter of defeating or taking back government regulation and government intervention in our lives, but often it is bubbling up from in society, and we should celebrate that and work for that as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Marty. I'm going to talk about some of my issues, and by the way, this is also, I'm sure that you ran, because we still may do this. I don't know if the next issue of Katherine's Reason is going to be about how we can finally get rid of the post office, but I know
We were all over that in the 80s.
I started working at Reason in 1993, and one of the first pieces that I had published in the magazine was about how it was something like fax machines were eroding the horrible government monopoly on first-class mail. And how many of you know what a fax machine is or has ever used it? Because it's like within a decade, the fax was gone. And, and I think you're right that a lot of times technology just blows things up in terms of, when we think of some, taxi commissions were more local entities, but they were controlling things. Uber has, upended that, although there's a bitter fight going on. So I was editor-in-chief. I took over in 2000, and the two covers here that are kind of interesting exemplify two of the major themes, which I think are very much still with us. The first one, the brown cover with the Big Brother is watching you icon there, was the first issue that we published after the 9/11 attacks. And we talked about the Patriot Act had been signed already, et cetera, and we talked about how the war on terror, which Donald Rumsfeld, who thankfully most of us have completely forgotten about, had talked about how the war on terror was going to be like the Cold War. And there was a palpable sense after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of communism, a lot of people were kind of nostalgic for that great twilight battle between good and evil, between the free world and the communist world. And people in the Bush administration were clearly looking for something like that, and they found it in talking about the global war on terror and as Islamic jihad. And we said, the main casualty are going to be people in countries that we bomb and we occupy, and we're still bombing and still occupying countries based on that, but also a massive assault on civil liberties, which stays with us. And that, this, for libertarians, it is a mix of, a foreign policy critique which was not taken seriously by either right-wingers or left-wingers. For most of the Cold War, there was very much of a consensus that, if you've read Robert Heinlein's Starship Troopers, a kind of idea that, like, we have to be anywhere the bugs might be, because if they get something, even if it's a useless piece of shit asteroid somewhere out, beyond the Alpha Centauri or whatever, we've got to be there because otherwise they'll have it. That was American foreign policy consensus, and the libertarian critique of that was, maybe there are better ways to win people to freedom and to free people, and it turns out, the end of the Cold War helped prove that with very few exceptions in Eastern Europe. It was peaceful revolutions, and as Marty was talking about, it was the ground up. The Berlin Wall didn't collapse on its own. It was pulled down by East Germans. And so we're still in this battle because Donald Trump, and I think Rand Paul was saying it and he was right, Donald Trump seemed to be more of a non-interventionist or a smart interventionist, certainly than Hillary Clinton. So far, it's not working out that way, but that's a major battleground, talking about foreign policy and how America can intervene in the world through markets, through trade, through commerce, in a way to make it freer rather than bombing people back to the Stone Age and looking at civil liberties being squeezed in America. The other issue, this says they know where you live. This came out 2004 or 2006. It was the very first mass-produced individualized magazine ever printed. We used cutting-edge technology, and one of our longtime readers and a contributor to Reason Foundation, the nonprofit that publishes us, does direct mail catalog stuff, and he had learned how to personalize things. So we printed up 45,000 magazines that went to subscribers that showed their house on the cover, that had 4 pages of material that was specifically keyed to their congressional district, to their county, to their congressional district, county, and one other thing. But it was, we were able, the ads were also personalized in that. And that was another big theme of one of the things Reason talks about is that, you know, we're trying to get beyond politics. We believe in free minds and free markets. We believe that the most interesting parts of life should exist beyond politics, which needs consensus, where 51% of the people can make 49% of the people live the way they want to. And individualization and personalization, which is very much in accord with most libertarian principles, we're seeing that in all aspects of our life. We see that in our personal lives, in our business lives, in our culinary lives, everywhere that government does not have a strong purchase. And hopefully through school vouchers and whatnot, we'll actually be able to see that in education. Hopefully if we get to a market system in healthcare and retirement, we'll also see people be able to individualize and personalize those very important parts of their lives the same ways they do their romantic lives, the same way they do, you know, when you get a cup of coffee or you go into a restaurant with one of those great new soda machines where you can literally make an infinite number of sweet drinks that will probably give you cancer and rot your teeth out. So those are kind of two of the big issues that defined my tenure at Reason, and I think those are still with us, both the good and the bad. And Katherine, why don't you take a swig at water and sex, it looks like.
Yeah, so I'm obviously the new editor-in-chief of the magazine. You can sort of think of Nick Gillespie's tenure and Matt Welsh's tenure after him as an extension. It was sort of a sex, drugs, and rock and roll overlay on the magazine. I'm thinking my tenure is going to be a little more sex, drugs, and robots, so if you guys are in for that, drop me a line. This issue, which went out to subscribers today, you can pick up your copy on the Reason table. It is a sex issue. I'm sorry to tell you, though, that it is like Reason's boner killer issue, basically, because it's all bad news. I don't know how it happened exactly. I was like, let's do a sex issue, it'll be fun, and then it was like, everyone's in jail. Just... so we have this great cover story by Elizabeth Nolan Brown that's about the Operation Cross Country, which is this huge national effort to catch child sex traffickers, which seems to actually just basically be a big dumb vice bust. We also have Jacob Sullum on the sort of unconstitutional irregularities of the way that we deal with people who are caught with child pornography. We have Deirdre McCloskey, who writes about her experience transitioning and being committed by various actors of the state for her personal choices. Like, it's just so depressing. I'm very sorry.
Does it come with Viagra or something, or at least a coupon?
Yeah, it should. Okay. Well, if we'd personalized it, we could have hit the right subscribers.
But the cover is
probably
not depressing.
But I'm really excited about bringing Reason in. Obviously, we will be covering Donald Trump. The issue before this one, we're sort of flirting with various terminology for him. I'm not going to call him a fascist today, but like a good Reason editor, I reserve the right to drop the F-bomb everywhere and anywhere. So let's just give it a minute. We'll see. For now, I'm liking corporate authoritarian, maybe. I don't know. You should let me know what you think about that one, too. I started out as an intern at Reason, so for those of you that are thinking about slogging through some kind of summer internship, you know, sometimes it pays off pretty well. That summer, I spent what felt like the entire summer transcribing an interview with this New Mexico governor who was really into weed. And I was like, this guy is amazing. He should probably have a wider audience. And then I became editor of Reason magazine, and everyone couldn't shut up about Gary Johnson. So these things come full circle, I guess. But I'm really looking forward to helming the nation's foremost libertarian publication. There's probably somebody in here that would like fight me for that title, right? But I think we deserve it. I think we're gonna talk a little bit about Trump because we've been too cheerful so far. But
so that's kind of backstory and bringing us up to the current moment. But now, libertarians in the age of Donald Trump. This is the other part, I think. How many of you are optimistic about Donald Trump? Okay, there's some. Yeah, I think I see a "Make America Great Again" hat, or is it? All right.
It could be
fair.
ironic.
Yeah, I think.
Can't be sure.
But it's, Marty, let's talk about libertarians in the age of Trump. What is your biggest concern? And it's not just Donald Trump. I mean, we are in a moment of American politics, of political life, very polarized. People are dropping out of the Republican and Democratic Party, which I find, a good thing. But what are your biggest concerns about Trump?
Well, I'm going to go straight to the meta level, and my biggest concern is that, Trump bills himself as a man of action, and he's going in there and doing a lot of executive action on things. And many of the things that he has promised to radically transform, to really upset in government, we would like to see radically transformed and upset, right? But my fear is that if it comes through strongman government rather than under rule of law, I think we lose. We lose because it's not about principles. It's not tenable and sustainable, and so that's my biggest fear. Fortunately, I think we have something to stand up against that. So I'm encouraged here by the breadth and depth of the intellectual libertarian movement. I'm the person long in tooth here, so I've been observing this. I said to somebody thinking about this, when I started out at Reason, basically that was all the libertarians in the country.
Just the Reason staff?
Yeah, just about. I mean, I'm exaggerating,
and even half of them were probably just saying, whatever, just get me to my next paycheck.
But not that many people. But now there are, Reason has played a role in building the intellectual substance. The organization I have worked at since leaving Reason for the last 28 years, the Institute for Humane Studies, that's our specialty, to convey these ideas and find people who are interested in them and build up their strength and build an intellectual movement. Right. You are both alumni of IHS programs. Right. The founders of SFL are alumni of IHS programs. There are now nearly 2,000 professors teaching at over 900 colleges and universities who are alumni of IHS programs. Our alums are throughout the think tanks and so on, and this is what matters. And Students for Liberty is now playing its part in bringing new young people into this fold. So we have to fight bad ideas with good ideas, and that's the opportunity. But the fear is that the impulse to action overtakes that.
And just very briefly to follow up on that too, I said hello to David Bose of the Cato Institute, who's out there somewhere, and a little while ago he looked at how according to Gallup poll results, that out of the 4 ways that Gallup slices up Americans ideologically, libertarians for the first time are the biggest chunk. There's 27% that kind of are considered libertarian, about 26 or 25% conservative. I forget, it was like 23 or 22% liberal and about 15% populist. So, this is your guys' time to go out there, the Students for Liberty, to really, you will be fighting the battle of ideas and whatnot.
We're counting on you.
Yeah. Trust me, because at least Marty and I are. We're not, we want to take it easy. But Katherine, what about you? What are your biggest fears for the era of Trump?
I think it's really simple. Free movement of people and goods across borders is an incredibly important thing. That's it. And Trump is not into either of those things, as far as I can tell. And that's something that That's what keeps me awake nights. I mean, I want everyone who wants to come here to be able to come. I want everyone who wants to sell us stuff to be able to sell us stuff. I want everyone who wants to leave here to be able to leave, and I want everything we make to be able to sell to the entire world. It shouldn't be hard. Apparently it is, and Reason is going to just be following every single freaking time Trump screws that up.
All right. And I'll add, I think something that kind of builds on or follows from what both Marty and Katherine had said. For me, it's the kind of classical liberal ideas of cosmopolitanism and pluralism and tolerance. Trump is not a tolerant person. We know that, right? And he does not seem to care much about pluralism. He doesn't have respect for different ways of living, different ways of doing things. He writes off whole populations. You know, Mexicans are, you know, if they're desperate enough to come here to work and do jobs that we don't want to do, they're rapists and drug dealers. And, you know, and I loved that when he opened, this was like how he announced he was going to be president. Some of them, I assume, are good people. You know, it's like, thanks, pal. But it's not just Trump, and it's not just Republicans like Jeff Sessions, who is anti-immigrant, or conservative groups like National Review, who are saying now that your position on immigration is for conservatives what abortion used to be. You have to be anti-immigration in order to be a conservative. That's not cosmopolitanism. It's disturbing, and it's something we need to fight. On the left, they have their own version. You know, they're not interested in tolerance or pluralism. This is the problem with things like speech codes on college campuses, or saying everybody who disagrees with you is not merely misguided, but is actually evil or should be punched. One of our writers wrote up a piece about how, you know, under the headline, well, that didn't take long, and it's like, it's okay to punch Nazis and also white male libertarians. And, you know, I take that one a little bit. Yeah, I take that one a little personally, but we're seeing in this moment where we have remnants of the right and the left who are commanding fewer and fewer people's allegiance, they're getting worse and worse, and they're intolerant, they're anti-pluralistic in different ways. And that's my big fear. We are going to stop now. We've been told we don't have time for questions, but because this has been a live taping of the Reason podcast, I would appreciate it if everybody could cheer so they know we're not just making this up. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, and I want to thank everybody at Students for Liberty, but also Marty Zupan of IHS. Thanks, Marty, so much. Katherine Mangu-Ward of Reason, so much. For Reason, I'm Nick Gillespie. Please subscribe to the Reason podcast at iTunes and look for us at reason.com. Thanks again so much.